Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am Andrea Woodard, Senior Vice President of Government Relations and Public Policy here at the Greater Des Moines Partnership. Thank you all for joining us. The partnership welcomes you to today's conversation on childcare. For all of you, since we're all online, thank you for your adjustment. Hopefully everyone is staying warm and safe at home or in their office. Please do feel free to place questions in the chat feature now and throughout the program. We'll get as many of those moderated during our Q&A portion here in a bit. As we always like to do with all of our policy events, we talk about our civility pledge. The partnership works with the Robert D. and Billy Ray Center at Drake University on the Show Some Respect campaign. With that in mind, I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone of the importance of civility in today's event and always. Advancing meaningful conversation requires respect, and at the partnership, we urge all Iowans to engage in active listening and to be courteous as they express their opinions about issues. Together, we can have tough conversations in a respectful way and find common ground solutions. As an organization, the goal of the public policy issue forums is to educate a broad audience on policy topics so more people understand the issue and can advocate to our elected officials. In 2023, we have 6 public policy issue forums scheduled to take place over every other month on the third Thursday at noon. This is our first forum for the year, and we are excited to cover more important topics throughout the rest of the year, which will include workforce readiness, placemaking, rural development, healthcare, and the Iowa caucuses. Also, I'll talk a little bit about our policy agenda at the partnership. Each year, the partnership's Government Policy Council develops a state and federal policy agenda that the policy team then uses to advocate throughout the year. Included in our 2022 federal policy agenda, because we're not quite ready to release our 2023 agenda, the partnership has shown support for childcare through expanding access to affordable childcare and policies that aid in that effort, including programs that support public-private partnerships to provide options to Iowa families. And in our 2023 state policy agenda, which we are already advocating for during the 2023 legislative session, it reads, access to affordable and quality childcare, which is what the partnership supports, which remains a need for many Iowans. The partnership supports additional investment in policies that increase childcare options for families and promotes stabilization in the childcare workforce. So with that, I want to thank all of you for being here, thank our panelists, and I want to especially thank our moderator, who I will turn it to now, Terry Caldwell Johnson. I'm going to do just a quick introduction for Terry. Terry Caldwell Johnson has spent her entire career in public service. Born in Salina, Kansas, Terry has a bachelor's in English from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, and an MPA from the University of Kansas. In 1988, Terry was appointed executive director of the Metro Waste Authority in Des Moines. She served in that position until 1996, when she was appointed to the position of Polk County Manager, which she held until 2003. In April of 2004, Terry was appointed to the position of President and CEO for Oak Ridge Neighborhood and Oak Ridge Neighborhood Services, a housing and human services nonprofit agency located here in Des Moines. This includes Oak Academy, an early learning and preschool program, so very fitting for our topic today. Along with her work, Terry has served on the Des Moines School Board since her election in 2006. She holds positions on the board of directors for several regional groups and organizations, and has received numerous awards and recognitions for her outstanding community leadership and service. The partnership, one of the funders of Capital Crossroads, the regional vision strategy, I do want to mention that Terry serves as one of the chairs of that Capital Crossroads effort, and we get to work with her a lot. And so with that, Terry, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrea, for that very nice introduction. Thank you, Ryan, for organizing us, and welcome to all of the individuals that have joined us today for this really important public policy forum focused on early childhood and child care. I have the pleasure of introducing the individuals that are our panelists today. There are 3 of them, and I will start with Alex Glenn, Generation Next. Alex graduated summa cum laude from Iowa State University in 2012 with a bachelor's degree in English and a certification to teach secondary education. After his student teaching at Lincoln High School, Southside Pride, way to go Lincoln, he began work at Next Generation. as an educator and was promoted in April 2013. Currently, he is in charge of human resources, social media, and tuition billing for Next Generation. He travels throughout all 5 of the centers that are managed by Generation Next, making sure that the staff and families are taken care of, and also making sure that they have everything they need to function and operate at the highest level. Outside of working hours, Alex can be found cheering on Iowa State, as well as the Kansas City Chiefs. I know he was a happy man this weekend. He currently resides in Ankeny with his wife and coworker, Kimberly. Welcome, Alex. The next individual that will be serving on our panel is Sherry Penny of the Iowa Women's Foundation. Sherry is a native Iowan raised in Williamsburg and now lives in Osage. She has a BA in elementary education from the University of Iowa. Recently, Sherry was the Economic Development Director for Mitchell County. She has experience working with businesses of all sizes, and recently formed a team to look at ways to increase the availability and access to quality, affordable childcare in the county. Sherry has also been a childcare provider and brings early care experience and knowledge to the position. She has extensive experience working with boards, committees, and volunteers. She is described as a collaborator, connector, and visionary who is an excellent individual put in a place to really help us to increase access to childcare and to help businesses determine how best to fit into that equation. Welcome, Sherry. And finally, I'd like to introduce Chris Sackett. Chris is a member attorney at Brown Winnick and a former longtime managing partner, leading the firm from 2007 through 2022. Chris's practice focuses primarily on domestic and international business, transactional, corporate, and security matters. With more than 25 years practicing law, Chris's clients describe him as a go-to guy in the marketplace and a lawyer with stellar legal judgment. Chris prides himself on his ability to partner with clients and add value by taking a practical, results-oriented approach. Chris is a member of several regional boards and councils and serves as a strategic advisor to the Iowa Economic Development Authority. He has twice been appointed to the Iowa Department of Revenue Innovation Fund Tax Credit Advisory Panel. When it comes to child care, Chris has helped to secure nearly $1 million investment in child care business incentive grant awarded to the Ruan Transportation Management System. So I'd like to thank Alex, Jerry, and Chris for joining us today. And what I'd like to do now is to turn it over to each of you briefly to share some opening remarks, not only about the topic of today's discussion, early childhood and childcare, but also what brought you to it and any other thought you'd like to share with the group. Alex, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Terry. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the invitation to attend this panel. This is a super important topic. As everybody here knows, childcare not only is the foundations of each future adult's learning, but it is also incredibly important. All we've heard about for 3 years is that we need to keep the economy moving. And if you want a well-oiled economy, then the foundation of that also stems from parents being able to work. So, like I said, this is a very important topic, one that is near and dear to my heart as a person who's worked in childcare for over 10 years now, graduated with an English degree to teach secondary ed, just a very important thing. So thank you again.
Sherry.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I'm honored to be here and to be a part of this conversation. Childcare is a huge passion of mine. I am the demographic that is impacted greatly when it comes to the workforce and working women trying to find childcare so that they can continue with their career. So I'm honored to be a part of this discussion, and I'm so excited because given my position through the Iowa Women's Foundation, being graciously grant funded through Iowa Economic Development Authority, I'm able to really travel around the state and work with businesses to help them understand how childcare is impacting their workforce, attraction, retention, and basically their bottom line. So I'm very excited to talk childcare today.
Awesome. Thanks, Sherry. And Chris.
Thank you, Terry. So I should say, first of all, I think I'm probably the least qualified of the panelists here, but just as engaged, I think. I agree that I want to thank the Greater Des Moines Partnership for asking me to be involved. I agree with the two panelists before me. This is one of, if not the most important issues challenging both employers and employees, parents, children, the public, private, it's multi-generational. So this is one of the biggest issues we face. We're all trying to attract and retain talented workforce. We all have to come up with creative strategies. And part of doing that, I think, is having dialogue and discussion like this to share ideas that we all have and gather the ideas that others have, because I think there is no one single solution to this problem, but it is a problem that we're all facing, both in our families, in our employees' families, and in our companies. So it's an honor to be here today. I look forward to some really productive dialogue. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks to each of our panelists. I couldn't agree more that the topic is not only timely, but one of great importance when we begin to think about not only developing, recruiting, and retaining a quality workforce, but also the importance of how it affects and impacts the kids and creates opportunities for incredible kindergarten readiness and school success overall. So the opportunity just to have this conversation, I think, is not only important to our community, but it's really important to our future. So I thank Alex, Sherry, and Chris for each being with us. So I'm going to turn my first question to you, Chris. You and the team from Brown Winnick played a role in the nearly $1 million child care business incentive grant that was awarded to Ruan Transportation in 2022 for the creation of a child care center in downtown Des Moines. Can you share with us ways that you think this grant will not only impact employees in downtown Des Moines, but what can organizations learn, not only from the work that you've done thus far, but from the work that's ahead as you begin to embark on this really important venture?
You bet. I'm happy to. And first, I should make sure that there's a shout out and tremendous credit to Ruan Transportation Management Systems, because their folks are really carrying the heavy weight here and doing all the hard work to try and take those grant funds and make them a reality. And they also get credit for initially pulling the consortium together and saying, look, folks, we all have these challenges, and now we have this opportunity with these grant funds. And to the extent that downtown Des Moines employers are trying to bring back their workforce, the challenge of childcare is so pressing that a consortium approach really seems to make the most sense. There are some economies of scale here, and the folks, regardless of what the nature of your company is, if you're downtown Des Moines, you have these similar issues. And I would say that developing a child care center in a downtown environment actually has unique challenges, and we're working our way through those right now. They come down to logistics. They come out to traffic patterns. They come out to available space and cost and build out. Getting green space that's required under Iowa law for a child care center. First floor access, but we've got the members of the consortium, and again, led by the folks at Ruan Transportation, are engaging in this dialogue with multiple parties. How do we benefit our employees by making this happen? Because we're all facing the same sorts of labor and workforce challenges. And this is a new and probably worsening still challenge that we all face, which is helping folks with childcare. But if we can kind of thread this needle or solve this problem through the use of these grant funds, which are a wonderful start, but they're one-time money. So we need to keep in mind the economics of starting and operating a childcare center are very challenging. And they're challenging. It's even challenging for childcare centers to attract their own workforce because the economies of the compensation is low. The available workers are low. But with these funds, we have a group of employers who are coming together and sharing their thoughts on what might work best. And we're working through that. And so I see this as a tremendous opportunity for employees who are working downtown. If they're able to bring their children, almost to work with them, have a nearby childcare center where they can get some time during the day sometimes, or avoid pickup delays and that sort of thing, that will be helpful. It'll be helpful to the employers by having an engaged and really happy workforce, by being able to minimize the challenges. So the dollars themselves are tremendously helpful. The collaboration both amongst businesses and frankly from a public-private standpoint is also beneficial. And frankly, I'm seeing that it's bringing together multiple generations of people as well, because it's not just a challenge for people of child raising age, but all people, because if other employees can't be present and engaged, it challenges the entire company. So I think that the grant funds and the collaboration communication that's come from that will be a tremendous boon for everyone here.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think everyone would agree that starting up a childcare center is not for the faint of heart. There are a variety of regulatory requirements that have to be met. When you think about staffing and workforce, that's another huge hurdle that has to be overcome. But I would say that it's worth the work because childcare is so critically important to our community and to our workforce and to the quality of life for our workers. So thanks for leading the charge, and definitely lots of things to be learned as the Ruan story plays out. So thanks for sharing that. Sherry, I'm going to turn to you because you're on the front lines of working with folks who are actually in the process of thinking through and thinking about either program development or program expansion. But I think it's really important also to understand, in order to close the workforce gaps related to childcare, the Iowa Women's Foundation has for many, many years been a leader in terms of helping folks to identify not only the opportunities, but the challenges. You've helped to form the Iowa Business and Childcare Coalition. Can you share with the audience a little bit about the coalition, its finding, its plans, and where the work is headed in the future? You're doing like groundbreaking work, so thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm happy to share. So our coalition is basically comprised of business leaders from around the state who are volunteering their time to serve on this panel to really talk about ways that they're seeing childcare impacting their workforce and also help to kind of shape the direction that we take. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this coalition was the creation of my position. So the coalition said, okay, we get it. The business community understands that childcare is an issue. They get it. They're starting to see it. They're understanding it. But what do we do about it? We need some actionable, some tangible things to help the business community. So that's where my position was created. And they partnered with Iowa Economic Development Authority, as I mentioned before. So my position is grant funded for the next 3 years to really work with businesses to give them the solutions. I provide one-on-one meetings with them, community meetings, one-on-one business meetings, also providing resources and contract examples to really help businesses understand what that looks like. What we really do is break it down for businesses and communities. I don't like to just focus on the business side because it's a community involvement. What we're seeing the most success when it comes to public-private partnerships is it's a community effort. It's your business community, it's your community stakeholders, your chambers, your EDCs, all working together on childcare. So one thing we really talk about is finding the need. We provide surveys to businesses to help them survey their employees and say, okay, we know that childcare is an issue, but how big is this need for our exact company? They survey their employees, then we circle back and figure out how are we going to meet that need. So for some businesses, especially like Ruan, who was able to receive that grant, it's an on-site build or coming together as a collaboration of businesses, a coalition, and doing an on-site childcare center because their needs are so great. There wouldn't be the capacity in surrounding centers to meet that need. So it is an on-site build, but it could also mean something as small as offering flexible work arrangements, stipends to your employees. We're seeing all sorts of different business innovative collaborations that are happening all across the state. And I know we'll get into some of that as we keep going. So I'm happy and excited to share some of those partnerships. Looking towards the future, we really just want to continue that long-term sustainability through funding resources, coalitions, collaborations, and really starting to talk to our legislators about implementing some of those tax incentives, tax credits. There's some really wonderful things coming through HHS that are really going to help some of our childcare providers, because I think at the root of this childcare crisis that we are facing in Iowa, it's a wages issue. It is getting those childcare workers into the field, keeping them in the field, and offering them a livable wage. What they're doing is such important work, and they're the third lowest paid profession in our state. So really these public-private partnerships we're trying to focus on is going to be more of the long-term sustainability of how are we going to keep these wages so that our childcare workers can afford to live, but also not have that burden of the cost go directly to our parents. So that's where we're seeing the business community really step up and invest in childcare.
So Sherry, I love what you shared about sort of walking alongside a business and helping them to determine not only how best to address their needs, and it may or may not be a new build, it may be collaborating with an existing center, but it sounds like you've sort of developed a guide and a set of steps and a toolkit that really creates opportunities for businesses to decide what the best fit for them will be. So thank you for that. And hopefully we'll be able to connect anyone that's listening today that's interested in getting resources from the Iowa Women's Foundation the opportunity to do so. So
Absolutely.
Alex, I think that Sherry set up a perfect segue to my question for you. What do you view as the biggest barrier in recruiting and retaining qualified childcare workers? We can build all the centers out there possible, but if we don't have qualified staff that's ready to come in and provide that support, it's just not going to be doable. So what are the biggest barriers in recruiting and retaining qualified early childhood staff?
Yeah, thank you. So let me start out by saying childcare is the childcare crisis is a multifaceted, insanely large, almost too big to comprehend issue. And yet it all boils down to one thing. What is the biggest issue facing us for retention and recruitment? And it is cost. It will always be cost. Sherry, I could have sat back and just had you answer this question. You nailed it perfectly. It's wages. Nobody gets into childcare because they think they're going to become the next Jeff Bezos. They don't. They have a passion for it. They have children themselves. But at the end of the day, they are not coming home making that livable wage, right? Or even seeing the same benefits that you can see across the street in any other business. You can go into a fast food restaurant and see wages that are not only competitive, but more than what you can offer. And I firmly believe that every childcare center in this state, probably nationwide, is at its heart a small business, and with a fixed income and with a large overhead. the revenue just isn't there to give everything that these child care center owners want to give, which is livable wages, great benefits packages, insurance that people can actually take time off and go to the doctor and their copays aren't insane, or their out-of-pocket maxes aren't absolutely just unheard of. Medical inflation, each time we come up for renewal for our medical insurance, goes up 10% annually, year over year, 10% on a premium cost. This is untenable. It's not affordable for people, especially making these lower wages. These centers are now offering things like 401ks to help retain and recruit, extra PTO time. These are amazing. These should have always been there. These should always have been for each and every person who is working this hard to make a living. We're just now getting to that, but in turn, they have to raise their prices to do so. And the parents are finding that the prices of the childcare centers are now, what I've been saying about everything else, unaffordable. So now we've got childcare centers that are saying, in order to be here, you have to pay $20,000 a year, more than college tuition for in-state. And these wages, or the revenue, is actually going to places. No CEO is making a 3 million% markup on this. This is in order to just keep the center running. It is always going to come down to wages. It's a vicious cycle. As it becomes more unaffordable, now we're leaving people out in the lurch. We're creating the generational poverty that it keeps going. Does a parent have to stay home in order to keep care of their kids? And who does this affect? It affects the already impoverished. It disproportionately affects children of color. It's always going to boil down to cost.
Yeah, Alex, I appreciate that, because I think what we find, especially in the industry, is that sort of natural tension that exists between revenue generation that's required in order to keep the doors open and holding the line on expenses. And oftentimes those two things don't always meet. And when they don't, you begin to have to think through and think about either shifts or changes that need to be made, cuts that may need to be considered, or additional revenue generation, which typically comes with the cost of enrollment and tuition that's paid by adults. So it feels like sometimes it's a vicious cycle. I know here in our center, we deal with many of those same things, but one of the things that you mentioned was how we begin to not only treat individuals who are working in the early childhood realm appropriately, just like we would any other employee, but also how we create the right mix of salary and benefits that makes it even reasonable for them to want to work in the industry. So I really appreciate sort of the proactive nature of your response, because it really is where the rubber meets the road when we begin to think about that really delicate balance between revenue generation and expenses associated with operating childcare centers. So thanks for that. So I'm going to open it up for anyone who might be interested in answering this next question. How can local, state, or federal government support the childcare industry and improve access to quality and affordable care for families in our region? It's open floor for anybody who might want to hop on to respond to that question, and you're all welcome to.
Well, I'm happy to provide some examples that we're starting to see around the state. When it comes to the local government, from the state government, we know that there were these wonderful one-time grant funds of infrastructure and slot purchasing, which is phenomenal. That was a really wonderful kickstart into tackling this crisis that we're seeing. But as Chris said, it's a one-time allotment of money. And so we really want to make sure that we're looking at sustainability. So one thing that we're starting to see are some wage supplement funds that are happening around the state. A lot of times we're seeing it in rural communities, but Johnson County just announced that they are implementing a wage supplement fund. What this is it's basically an ask to the business community, to your local government, city councils, county supervisors, to start and create a wage supplement fund. So it can be housed under a 501c3 or a 501c6. And really what it is it's for any registered provider. So that includes all of your in-home providers, your centers, to access these funds to increase their childcare wages, so that the cost doesn't go to the parents. So what that looks like in some communities is the business community is donating $100 per year per employee that goes into this fund. So even your small Main Street floral shop may say, you know what, we can give $100 a year into this fund to keep childcare open and accessible in our communities. And the sky's the limit. Maybe the business wants to look at only doing the childbearing ages of their employees, if they have 10,000 employees. So it's really unique to each business, and that's where we can kind of come in and help you with that. But these wage supplement funds are a really great start to something that can be sustainable long term.
Alex or Chris, any additional responses you'd like to provide to that question around how local, state, federal government can help assist?
I'd like to comment on that one. I think my experience is that the local governments, particularly in smaller communities, are maybe doing a better job. And maybe that's because smaller communities do a better job of identifying what they view as our common challenge, right? That's harder in larger communities, I think. And so in the smaller communities, it seemed like a broader spectrum of people take ownership of the challenge and of the opportunity. And so what that leads me to believe is if we can get more people engaged on this, and maybe from a what can, public, state, federal, what can they do? I think maybe it's a key would be to incentivize businesses to view this as or to solve the problem. There are programs to address workforce housing, for example. Workforce housing is an attraction and retention issue. It may be easier for people to wrap their heads around it because they're talking about workforce housing. They're thinking about, housing people that are the employees. Well, those prospective employees, to the extent they have children or want to have children, the childcare issue is just as extreme as the housing issue. It really is. I know housing is a basic human need. Caring for our children is a basic human need. And so if we can find ways to incent employers to view an investment in childcare as the cost of doing business now, and maybe one of the costs of having an engaged and happy workforce, I think that might be one of the big keys. So it's hard to, it's kind of a wandering answer, but it really is sort of find a way to really have a public-private incentive to private businesses to invest in this need.
Yeah, I think, Chris, you raise a really good point there, especially with some of our smaller communities. Local governments are taking the initiative to create centers that are pockets of opportunity for individuals that need access to childcare that may or may not have it in close proximity. So I've heard of several local governments that have actually invested some of their ARPA dollars in the creation of centers, so that they have created the bricks and mortar opportunity for their community to really begin to respond to the needs of individuals who are working in and around the area. Alex, was there anything you wanted to add to that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would like to see a more hands-on approach as far as where a state or even federal government would step in and allocate some funds. I see it early childhood education, I mean, you can look at the data. It is great to set up for future success now. Nobody ever says, oh boy, we spent too much money on education. Our populace is just too educated. So I think, and as we all know, education is massively underfunded, state, federal, any way you cut it. It would be nice to look at early childhood education and childcare as part of that bucket, as part of that education bucket. It would be nice to be able to look at our staff, our teachers, and tell them that you are as important, because we know it in our hearts, you are as important as the third grade teacher you had or the senior history teacher you had. You are a teacher. You deserve the reputation. You deserve the respect. And to do so, it would be lovely to pay them what they deserve. It would be lovely to be able to pull from something like an IPERS, like a retirement fund that would help ease some of that burden from the the business owners themselves. Some subsidies would be excellent. Like that wage subsidy sounds amazing. It would be nice to have some help on that. Like I said, that insurance field, we're looking at when we come down to our cost, where our largest gaps, and it's in being able to be seen as a competitive employer, giving you what you need, what you deserve to live.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. One of the other things that I think can be considered, especially at the state government level, is the level of reimbursement that centers receive for childcare assistance. Childcare assistance is something that's provided for individuals who oftentimes are at the lower end of the wage scale themselves, but are still gainfully employed and need access to early childhood. And when you begin to look at the actual cost of operation versus the level of reimbursement that centers receive when they have large numbers of kids that are receiving childcare assistance, it just doesn't match. So again, really beginning to look at those strong public policy issues that again help us to address the revenue gaps that we're seeing and create even greater opportunities for centers to at least meet their bottom line and not always operate somewhat in the red. So thanks for those responses. Those were all really, really good. I'm going to turn our attention, and Sherry, I might start with you on this one because you talked a little bit about this earlier relative to collaboration and partnerships that organizations have formed to address childcare issues in a community. Can you just illuminate a little bit on your experience with collaboration and partnership and share with the audience ideas that might spark some interest for them to pursue some of those same things?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you. I'll kind of start at the lower end. As I mentioned, we're seeing everything from offering childcare subsidies or flexible work arrangements all the way up to those on-site builds. So it's quite the spectrum of public-private partnerships that we're starting to see. Some on the lower end, we're seeing companies that are able to offer some of their HR services to childcare providers so that they can take that cost off of the director, for instance. Some accounting, offering some accounting, even something as simple as snow removal. All of those kinds of things are going to help. Some of the really exciting ones that we like to share across the state are innovative. We see an industry in Western Iowa that has decided they would like to offer their new parents to work from home for the first 6 to 8 months of that child's life to save them that first initial cost when we know that childcare is the most expensive in the infant and toddler stages. However, on the flip side, they have production staff that this is not a possibility for. Those production workers have to be there. They have to be on site. So what this industry has done is actually partnered with the local childcare center, purchased a set number of spaces. And what they did with those spaces is they went ahead and are paying more than the average weekly rate that an infant pays. So there is a little more of your operational cost coming in. And they're paying 100% of the childcare cost for the production staff for their first 6 to 8 months of the life of that child. And then once that time limit is up, the cost goes back to the parents, but they're also offering a 50% wage reduction. So the company is then paying for 50% of that weekly rate of the childcare, and then the employer only has to pay for 50% of that. So that's just one really unique example. I could fill hours of time on all the wonderful, we have school district partnerships, we have business coalitions, we have the wage supplement programs, the list goes on and on. So it's so exciting to be able to see some of these partnerships, but I will happily let others speak to some of these partnerships, or I am happy to keep going.
Hey, Chris, why don't we go to you next on this question? Because I think the collaborative spirit that Ruan went into their venture really, I think, represents how best businesses can combine forces around creating a single opportunity for multiple businesses to gain access. So can you talk a little bit more about sort of the nature of that collaborative partnership and what that coalition looks like?
Sure, I'm happy to. So I think what a lot of the answers that we're hearing emphasize is the need to view this challenge, wherever it is, as all of our challenge. Historically, it seems like we have seen some, more often we'll see either freestanding childcare centers, or we'll see one that is more, I'll call it a captive within a single employer who's what I'll call very progressive minded and saying we need to offer this benefit to our employees. And I would bet, by the way, if you ask those companies, that they would say that it actually returns more to them than the cost. I think they would view that as an investment in their employees and an engaged workforce and a culture builder than they would just a supplement or lost money. But what I would say is the consortium type approach really just takes that same mindset of we as a single employer have a challenge and perhaps an opportunity. And usually what happens, I know this has happened within our own law firm, when we looked at, we've talked about doing a childcare for a number of years and have always kind of gotten stumped by the stopping point, I guess I'll say, or the challenges. Do we have enough need? Do we have enough funding? Do we have enough engagement that we want to operate and own a freestanding, childcare facility? And the answer has historically been no. But when you get a number of other larger employers together who have the same or similar challenges and have different strengths and different areas of engagement and different abilities or willingness to invest, but to solve a common issue for the benefit of all of the employers, that's when you get real collaboration. Because frankly, again, in downtown Des Moines, we have lots of employers, lots of big employers. And if others' experiences are anything like we have at Brown-Winnick, their workforce is having a lot of babies these days. And so that's wonderful. And we want to be a family-friendly employer, as most do. Well, to be family-friendly is more than just, giving lip service to the fact that we're happy that you have children, but we want to help you deal with the challenges that come with that. And so it really, when you get a group of employers, again, with different backgrounds and different perspectives on things, you get a diversity of opinions, but you can still come together to solve a common problem. And that's what we're seeing with the collaboration, is a number of different approaches. When somebody runs into a challenge, we can oftentimes find someone else done a little differently. And so we're still working through that with and under leadership of Ruan Transportation, but definite progress being made.
Thanks for that, Chris. So I'd like to thank our panelists. We will actually come back to them shortly because I have a couple of other closeout questions, but I'd like to turn it back over to Andrea for introduction of a special guest that we have today. Andrea, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Terry, and thanks, yes, also to the panelists. Looking forward to hearing more, but we wanted to kick off the Q&A session with a quick federal update. We've really had a great conversation around local, state, and federal. But with us, and Hunter, if you're on, feel free to join us on camera if you'd like. If not, we're going to turn it to you for a couple of minutes. So as you know, the partnership is a bipartisan organization, and we work with all of our elected officials, both sides of the aisle. But one great thing I think for Iowa is Senator Ernst was in the new Congress, has been named the ranking member for the Small Business Committee. And it's great to know that she, and if you don't know, she will be making childcare one of her top priorities. And it's something that the partnership will be really leaning into at the federal level as well. And so Hunter Koski, is that how you pronounce it, Hunter?
Koski, that's correct.
Koski, great. Well, Hunter's with us, and he's just going to provide a couple of minutes of some things that we should all be looking out for as the Congress progresses throughout the year, and what we might see from Senator Ernst and her work on the Small Business Committee. So Hunter, take it away for a couple of minutes before we turn it back to the panel for the rest of our Q&A.
Great. Well, great to see all of you today. And I'm really encouraged by the comments that you've made on childcare and all the great progress that you've made. It's a hugely important issue to the state of Iowa, and for Senator Ernst, she spoke about it at length in her book, Daughter of the Heartland. This has been a top priority for hers for years. And so I want to start with an earlier priority that she had with Senator Rosen called the Small Business Investment the Small Business Child Care Investment Act, which would allow for nonprofit child care providers to receive SBA loans. That's something we're continuing to work on, and we want to be able to see that bill move forward as a priority for her as ranking member of the Small Business Committee. And so that would be helpful in rural Iowa, it would be helpful in Des Moines, and it would really open up a new precedent for nonprofit businesses to receive SBA loans, because currently they're not able to. And so we want to be able to see them do that in the childcare space, because it would really alleviate a lot of the struggles that nonprofits have, in the childcare space. But more specifically, she has her own bill called the Child Care Debits Act. It would make it so that small businesses can use SBA loans, notably 7A and 504, to be able to open up a child care facility at their small business for their employees. And so if you're a small business and you want to be able to operate a child care benefit, you can use an SBA loan to, build a new space in your facility, repurpose a room, hire the correct staff to be able to open up a child care operation for your employees. So, and that's done because in a lot of rural counties, we have child care providers, but there's a backlog. Let's say you have, 1,000 kids that need child care, but there's only enough space to accommodate, say, 300 of them. And so if we're able to have small businesses offer an on-site child care benefit, if they choose to, they would opt in for this. And also empowering the nonprofits, then we can really increase the supply of childcare availabilities throughout Iowa, and that's would apply to Des Moines and in rural counties. And so both of those bills are priorities for her. The Child Care Debits Act is her bill. Senator Grassley is a co-sponsor, and she is the Republican lead on Senator Rosen's Child Care Small Business Investment Act. And so if there are any questions from the partnership, then I would really like to open up to the partnership, because I'd really be happy to answer any of those. And again, it's great to see y'all again. I met with the partnership a year ago when y'all came to DC, and so I'm sure that there's some familiar faces.
Thanks, Hunter. If anyone does have questions for Hunter or questions that we at the partnership can gather, please go ahead and put those in the chat. And I know this is a conversation that will continue. We will also make sure that if you don't already have it, know how to contact Senator Ernst's office, because these are great opportunities and a perfect example of ways that we can advocate as an organization and as our members and investors. So then, Hunter, thank you for joining us. And with that, let's keep the conversation going. Terry, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Andrea. For those of you that haven't had a chance to look in the Q&A, Eric Kohlsdorf, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correct, has put in several comments that I think are so pertinent to things that we can be thinking about relative to tax incentives. There were some recent changes in ratios for early childhood, and I'd like our panelists, and maybe that's something I'll delve into a little bit with them here shortly. But thank you, Eric, for your comments, and really appreciate the feedback that you're giving us relative to things that we can be thinking about. I would like to maybe shift our attention very quickly to a really interesting operational challenge that we all have, obviously meeting ratio. And Chris, you may not be able to weigh in on this, so I may just lean on Sherry and Alex a little bit. But one of the things that was done in legislation in 2022 was to lower the age of individuals that could provide care in child care center settings, but to then also lower the ratio or increase the ratio, the number of students to teachers. I think practically there's some things about that that certainly makes sense in terms of a quick fix, but I also wonder about really the efficacy of that when it comes to early childhood care. So Alex or Sherry, either of you like to weigh in on that? Because I do think that when we begin to think about staffing challenges, this was maybe an opportunity for a quick fix, but I don't know that it's the right fix. So any thoughts?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind taking that one. So first and foremost, yes, during the pandemic, especially and its aftermath, childcare have had an absolute lack of qualified employees, and so in response, the state Congress decided to increase the ratios. I don't have them exactly in front of me, but I believe it went from one teacher to 4 children under the age of 2 to 1 teacher to 6 children under the age of 2, and kind of increased by 2 throughout there. Generation Next, which is where I am, where I work out of, has not actually used these new ratios. And the reasoning for that is safety. I challenge anybody here who has never worked in childcare to think of themselves with 2 infants, twins, and think of how easily they would be able to care for them over a 12-hour period without pulling their hair out. And now I challenge you to double that. And that is what the ratios were before that. And now think of you caring for 6 children under the age of 2. 3 of them have soiled diapers. The other 3 need to eat. It is a logistical nightmare. And as far as safety, it just being able to actually care for and watch these children at the same time, providing the care that the parents expect. They want their children to have eyes on them at all times. It becomes a little more difficult as you increase the number of children under each teacher's care. So we have not taken part in that for that reason.
Sherry?
Yeah, I would just like to add, I think what Alex said is, I agree. I will say, as my work across the state with community childcare providers and the businesses, but specifically in this question to the childcare providers, most of our childcare providers are doing the same thing as Generation Next, because while childcare workers hold this work so passionately and so close to their hearts, because as we know, they're not making millions of dollars. They're doing this because they genuinely care about the children in our state and their future. So one thing that we really stress is that while we want to see all these wonderful changes happen, we don't want the quality of care to suffer. And that needs to be first and foremost, because we don't want, as a mother of twins, I can tell you 2 infants is incredibly hard. And after working in an infant room, 4 infants is doubly as hard. So there's no possible way for one person to physically be able to hold and carry and maneuver. And then you have to start thinking with that quality, what if a fire happens? You now have to get all of these infants into the crib, get them outside. As a parent, that's a really alarming thought to think of. So I kind of agree with Alex. We don't want to see the quality suffer. On the flip side of that, the nice things with some of the age requirements of a 16-year-old being able to open a center. One nice thing that does come with that is you would be able to have some of your high school students who may be active in sports after school. It opens them up to be able to come in and work before school and opening up those shifts. But again, we don't want to see that quality suffer. So I'm in agreement with Alex in that.
Great, great. Well, I have one final question, and I'm going to ask each of you to be very brief in response to this, maybe just a sentence or two, but I think it's a really great way to close out today's discussion. So we've talked a lot today about sort of workforce opportunities for collaboration and partnership around early childhood. But based on what we've discussed today, what does the future hold for the next generation of Iowa parents and caretakers when we think about the notion of childcare in the state of Iowa? Who would like to go first? Short, brief, so I can turn it back over to Andrea.
I can go quick, and it's challenging. It's very, very challenging. The good news is I think there is widespread engagement and effort on these issues. And so to the extent that people can share their ideas and celebrate their ideas, in addition to investing their dollars, that will be the key to this. It's not just going to be solved with money, and it's just not just going to be solved with ideas, but there's no reason to, if you see something that's working, we got to share it, because this is everybody's challenge and everybody's opportunity.
Thanks, Chris. Sherry, I'll go to you next.
Thank you. I completely agree with Chris, and I would just echo to continue to please just keep talking about it. IWF has resources available that we are happy to provide you. So just please keep talking about it. Talk to your legislators.
Alex?
Simply put, I think that childcare is at a crossroads, and we have the opportunity now to either treat it as the public good that it is and invest in it with our money and ideas, or we can watch a bubble quickly burst. So I hope it's the former.
Thank you so much to Alex Glenn, Sherry Penny, and Chris Sackett for an engaging conversation around a really important topic. It's my pleasure to have moderated today. I'll turn it back over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you as well to you and our panelists. Thank you to those who were able to join us today. Just wrapping up with a couple of items, and then we'll send you on your way. As I mentioned at the start, this is our first issue forum for 2023. We invite you to join us for our other forums, and the next one is on Thursday, scheduled for Thursday, April 20th at noon, and we will cover the topic of workforce readiness. Also, don't hesitate to mark your calendar for Tuesday, April 4th. You can join the partnership up at the Capitol here in Des Moines for Day on the Hill, and that'll be a good opportunity to do just what you've been asked to do, is advocate to your state legislators on some key policy legislation that will help support our childcare industry. And then secondly, you'll see on the screen our annual fly-in to Washington, D.C., where we will inevitably get a chance to talk more with Hunter and Senator Ernst and the entire Iowa delegation about childcare and other policies during DMDC 2023 come May. To make sure that you are receiving all of the information and resources related to public policy on a local, state, and federal level, please sign up for our weekly GPC e-newsletter, where we also feature public policy blogs where we dig deeper into specific policy topics. And some of those are going to be shared here in the chat. So grab those. We will share out more information following today's event. Thank you all for your time. Stay warm, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.